big issue transitioning 2015, 2016, the refugee situation. A lot of Americans say Donald Trump said, well, I don't think it's the right time to bring in refugees. And what I've said is, after all, we didn't bring any Japanese in 1941. What is your opinion? Because a lot of the Democrats, and I don't understand that, saying, "Oh, let the refugees come."
I think most people, and I want everybody to think about this because I'm a strong proponent of immigration reform as it involves our southern borders and the like. But I think, given the two dimensions to answer your question, one, unfortunately, when you take a look at a place like particularly Syria, I understand that this has been a horrible situation for literally hundreds of thousands of people. Assad's killed 250,000 of his own people. He got millions of refugees. But particularly from certain parts of the world, I'm just not sure that we've got the background information. They talk about screening. They talk about being able to review everybody in a timely way, and it may take a year or two. I'm just not confident that they've got sufficient information from law enforcement, the intelligence community, to do effective screening. So everybody said, let's put a pause on this for a while until we can recalibrate whether or not we can actually do the job. And I think that's probably appropriate as it relates to refugees from certain parts of the globe. More importantly than that, John, I would tell you that the countries that are involved in accepting the refugees, that is just a consequence of the broader global community's failure to take on ISIS in Iraq and ISIS in Syria. And you can continue to have refugees fleeing these barbarians, these murderers, until the global community, particularly, hopefully with U.S. leadership, and that may take another president, and NATO countries, and by the way, the countries in the neighborhood, the Arab countries, figure out that they need a multinational force, a multinational commitment, a global strategy to go in and defeat ISIS. And they'll continue to have problems if ISIS continues to run freely, and they are, in spite of what the president says, and get further and further embedded into Syria and Iraq. So a pause for refugees from that part of the world, I think, is very appropriate this time. I also think that you're not going to do it unless we do something about the cause of that problem. You're going to continue to have enormous pressure on these refugees seeking safe havens elsewhere.
I agree 110%. I think we're not saying we don't want refugees, but a pause, I think, is very, very appropriate until we know that we feel good about who we're letting in.
Well, if I might, I think some of the people have appropriately said. I think, and again, I'm a Jeb Bush proponent, so I want to make sure your listeners understand that. But Jeb has said, and some others have called for a zone that is protected from airspace, that is protected by the military, and let's say we're going to have to spend a lot of money. That we need to set up humanitarian refugee camps to deal with this exodus of people that are frightened, whose communities have been disrupted, whose families have been destroyed, whose villages have been absolutely gutted from ISIS. And I do think that the global community, in addition to figuring out how they're going to handle it militarily, owes these people the development of significant refugee camps until the internal situation can be resolved. And until we do that, I say shame on all of us, because we let this cancer grow. We let ISIS continue to take over these communities, behead individuals, pursue Christians, all the infidels. And until we do something dramatic, both from a military point of view and help build these refugee camps, I would say shame on the rest of the world. And the UN's not going to do it, so the NATO countries with the United States has to take the leadership.
In other words, protect them where they are. Let them move 300 miles away from their home, or 400 miles, not 4,000 or 5,000. That way they can go home when it's time to go home.
I think that's true. I think that's true for the time being. I mean, and maybe by then we'll have a means by reviewing backgrounds, and we get to know. I mean, at UNHCR, Human Relations Commission. I mean, there'll be plenty of people there. We'll be able to sort through all these people. But just a mass exodus into these countries, I think, is, at least in the United States, I think most of the leaders in on my side of the aisle, and others on Democrats have called for a pause, and I think it's appropriate.